What's up everyone, this is Ryan here, the Crypto Grinder, and today I am having a very important project which is going to be helping more independent artists make money. I think as a content creator myself, we all know that making money on a free platform is always very challenging, and at the same time we always want to connect with our fan base or our subscribers. Now, could this project, FENIX.CASH, be the answer? So today I have the team from FENIX.CASH. So to my right is Allan Klepfisz. We have Lance Ford, who is also one of the founding members and marketing for FENIX.CASH. We have here on my left Sandy Monteiro, independent consultant to FENIX.CASH, and head of execution Richard Lee. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think we all want to know, how do you all come up with the concept of FENIX, and why do you decide to want to build this platform on the blockchain?
I think there's two primary answers. First of all, it was obvious to us for some time in our various music endeavors that the non-famous artists were struggling to make a living. So that's really the starting point of thinking about the blockchain, and it's the starting point of everything to do within the blockchain. And the second thing is that one of the ways that we can improve the current situation is actually using cryptocurrency and the blockchain.
All right. So now, this platform actually sounds more of an artist management system, right? But at the same time also, I think artists would want to know how they can further build their business or make money from this platform. So firstly, I kind of spotted a few key differences, right? Or the similarities. So what is the difference between Spotify and, of course, the Q-Track streaming services? And has music streaming ruined the music industry? So before we go into the main platform, I think this is a question that I think a lot of the audience has asked.
I'd be loath to say that streaming has ruined the music industry. Streaming obviously works much better than piracy worked, for example, for artists. But the truth of the matter is that the industry as it exists now is very much successful artist-oriented. It is celebrity artist-oriented. It's not oriented towards 98% of artists who are unsigned and who are trying to make a living. And that is the key differentiator between us and the Spotifys or any other digital service. We are now going to focus on the artists who are struggling to make a living and give them tools and ways to do precisely that.
Fair to say, Spotify is a subscription-based app, and we fundamentally don't agree with that as a philosophy for the future of music in the 21st century. It's 1% at best of the world that will ever pay for a subscription, and we've always had a much more mass view on how to help and participate in this industry and in this space, especially with emerging artists. And that access has to be free, just as it is with the big boys like Facebook and Google, and then you can monetize around that. So that's a basic difference in philosophy and fact.
I think for me, the move to streaming has changed the model significantly. In the old days, when you sign a contract with an artist, and then when you sell an album, when that album is sold, the buyer is paying for a lifetime of music in that one device. So every time the artist comes up with a new album, they get money up front for a lifetime of usage. So the change to streaming is that there is no more one time for life payment. You are paid in portions of pennies every time the song is used. So the artist is no longer receiving checks for significant bodies of work, because now they're getting it in real time, for the actual usage. So the commercial model about an artist being able to create an album and knowing that there's going to be funds coming in, in chunks from that album no longer exists. They will be getting pennies and pennies and pennies, and maybe over 25 years get the same amount of money which they would have got up front in the past. So it changes the model significantly.
Right. Okay. So the next question, would it be easy for Spotify or iTunes to tap their current catalog and offer the same offerings as FENIX.CASH?
I think one of the great impediments to following our model is the philosophical orientation, right? That is, if you are a business dedicated as a starting point to make the maximum profits for your shareholders, you're very unlikely to be prepared to do the hard yards of setting up an ecosystem like this. And while we think that ultimately this will produce a lot of money for the artists, and subsequently for people that are involved in it from a commercial sense, right, our starting point is the artist. It is not the starting point of a lot of music business, but our starting point is artists, and it's based on the fundamental belief that if you satisfy the artists and their needs, they'll bring in the fans, and then you have a very large ecosystem. It's not the orientation of these other services you mentioned.
So the current streaming services, the objective is to be as ubiquitous as possible, as much music as possible, and then they sell the fact that they have a lot of music. That's the current premise of most of the streaming services. I think what this platform is trying to do is that it's taking it the other way around. It's like having the artists curate their whole personality and how they want to take the fan through an engagement with them, offering the ability to monetize at the same time. So it's not about how much music you have on the platform. Is that if you have an artist that you like, is there a way of engaging with the artist where the artist can engage with you, right? And is there a way of commercializing that at the end that is of great benefit to the artist and to the fan?
I think also it's very important to remember that our starting point for most people here is a relationship that's already existing between an artist and their fans. And therefore, unlike Spotify, where we're saying, here is music, go and find it and do what you like, the starting point here is your favorite artist, you have that relationship, and we're making that relationship better for you. So people will come for a specific...
And better for the artist as well.
And better for the artist.
All right. So, what is the future of the music industry where FENIX.CASH is supposed to revolutionize the industry? I think this is a very big question.
It is indeed. And clearly, one of the great advantages of the digital age is the ability for a not massive artist to be able to produce their music and to have it heard. Now, the problem has been that it hasn't been very efficient distribution. That is, a local artist sometimes has trouble getting their music out to the world. And the other problem is that there haven't been a mechanism for earning a decent living from it. So we want to be able to take a local artist, make their audience much wider, but also give them the tools to earn money. And we can certainly enumerate those tools, but that is really, really the key. The great promise of the internet was that you didn't have to be famous to be heard. But the truth of the matter is, it requires something more than just the internet to make that happen. And blockchain, in my view, facilitates that greatly.
Okay.
I add also that advertising, actually, which we have some experience in, is the future of music. It is, of free music, because if music ever gets any percentage of, for instance, what search gets, people spend a hell of a lot more time listening to music every day than they do searching, then you can reinvent the music industry in a more traditional sense, even not doing what we're doing here. It's not something that's been adopted by the industry, and they'll probably have to die out before they do. But digital is built on advertising. That's how all these free sites are monetized, and it's something that we've talked about a lot, and we're going to integrate into FENIX as well. And those dollars is another form of revenue that can be shared back to artists.
Okay. So, you mentioned QTracks, right? And we just mentioned that in the beginning. So what is the relationship between QTracks and FENIX.CASH?
Well, apart from the obvious relationship, which is that we founded QTracks and we're founding FENIX, the other thing is that with QTracks, we had a dream, which we're now about to fulfill, and that is to be able to bring free music to people. The reality with QTracks was that while the subscription model suits a number of countries, and it might be 16, 20 or so countries in the world where people are prepared to pay subscriptions. There's a lot of countries, a lot of regions in which people won't. For example, much of Asia, South America, the Middle East, Africa, etc. And so in developed countries, people indeed will pay subscription. For developing countries where the only choice is piracy, right, if they want to get their music, and there is no legal alternative which is free, we think it's very unfortunate. We think it deprives the artist of income, ultimately deprives labels of income, etc. So this is what QTracks was founded on, and we're finally bringing to fruition after years of struggle. But it was our belief that this was a very, very important thing to do, to monetize music in those regions where at the moment was basically mostly piracy. But that's really only half the story. And FENIX.CASH is the other half or more of the story, which is how you actually get artists to monetize their music. So they have a sort of natural, if you like, companionship in really addressing what we think needs to be addressed in the music industry today.
All right. So despite the fact that I do like for the fact that this platform is going to help independent artists make more money, but I did do a little bit of digging, and QTracks does have some dirt on it, right? So please address the previous lawsuits against QTracks.
Yeah. First of all, there is nothing in the way of dirt, and dirt is always an interesting term.
That's right.
That we shy away from. Right? There's nothing that we feel we need to be ashamed of. It's a rough and tumble endeavor to try to revolutionize anything, let alone the music industry, right? So the fact of the matter is there were times we had disagreement with some vendors, right, and they resulted in lawsuits. I would say to you, the majority of people that have known us would hopefully speak highly of us, right? But most importantly, when you set up a business enterprise like QTracks, your commitment primarily is in those people who've entrusted hard-earned money in you. And if there's one thing we can be proudest of during this very, very long saga of trying to do something worthwhile is we never gave up. We never gave up. We have, for Lance and I, for many, many years, and more recently with Richard, there's all sorts of alternatives of what we could pursue. And we chose not to pursue alternatives to perhaps enrich ourselves because we had an obligation to those people who had trusted us and who wanted this vision to come true. So I would say, along the ways, we had, a failed launch. We had what you mentioned, which is some lawsuits. Nothing was really as major as the fact that we stayed on the path of trying to make this vision come true. And thankfully with FENIX, we have a way of creating a much more enveloping, complete vision.
Also, I would say, right, just to continue this for a second, to quote Don Henley, if anyone knows Don Henley, is a founding member of the Eagles, one of his solo songs, he said, if dirt were dollars, we'd all be in the black. Right? If dirt were dollars, we'd all be in the black. In other words, people love this stuff and trade on it. They generally do nothing for themselves, but they love to talk about others. I'll also say this, that you try and do something in a massive disruptive business and not get sued. Give it a try. Very hard not to. There are a lot of forces fighting people who are coming in and changing traditional business for the better and taking it away from existing constituents who run it. So that's my comment on that.
And I think Sandy here will probably have something to say because Sandy used to be from the major labels as well.
Oh, Sandy, I'm sorry. Forgot about that.
I mean, like I said, I remember when these guys first came around with QTracks, and it was a revolution because we thought, in those days, the way you got music was you downloaded. You downloaded one song, you could pay for one song. And then these guys were coming in with this whole idea where you just gave all the music to everybody and advertisers paid for it. We were nervous about a model like this because it was so different. And the fact is, there was a lot of discussions on how and when we could do a model like this. And unfortunately, QTracks was a bit ahead of the curve because, 2 years later, Spotify launched on exactly the same basis. And Spotify didn't get sued, but in the meantime, QTracks got sued. So luck is in time.
Not by the labels, I should mention,
Yeah.
but by others. And, as Lance alludes to, you never know which forces, right, lurk behind somebody that's trying to give you a hard time.
Sure.
The truth of the matter is there's always resistance to change. And the other thing that I think is worth noting is change very rarely in any industry comes from within. It always comes from without, right? And so, it's a hard road. And you have to be prepared to stick by your guns and continue, and we have.
Okay, but I think also relevant in this is the timing of this. And there is history, obviously, when you've been at something for as long as QTracks has, there's history. But the lawsuits and the launch and so on you're talking about, the launch, or the attempted launch was in 2009?
8.
So 10 years
ago.
So I think just to put in context in terms of where we are and where these things are in terms of relevance.
Okay, so now there is a mention on how tapping into scale and reach of QTracks music app will help the network to grow rapidly during the initial phase. However, the application cannot be downloaded yet. Moreover, some claim that QTracks has a rather mixed reputation in the music industry, as well as some poor reviews about its previous QTracks player. So, can you comment about that?
Look,
We have a great player.
I don't know when we got poor reviews, but I know that somebody in a label that Sandy once used to work for, Universal Music, said it was the best player they had seen. Maybe in an early iteration somebody said something negative, and maybe there was some set-up comments, right? The truth of the matter is we had a great player. As for the importance of QTracks and distribution of FENIX, in the early times, because QTracks is based on a telco model in developing countries, the telcos will actually give you some distribution. I think, if we talk about the crypto field, blockchain field, ICO field, I think there are a lot of things that could be improved. One of the things is that lots of people go out and they raise money without a product. We actually already have the FENIX product, we already have the QTracks product, and while we're further enhancing the FENIX product to make it customizable to bands, it's there already, right? And that is very important because of the fact that we don't want to ask people to trust in us that we're going to develop the product. We have the product, right? As for the product's reliance on distribution of QTracks, yes, it's a leg up in the beginning because not only do you need the product, but you need some early distribution of it. It's great to have a product, but if nobody's going to use it, you're not going to found a business on it, right? And the truth of the matter is, telcos want a product which has a complete catalog, etc. So it gives us an early entree. But ultimately, FENIX will stand on its own, independent of QTracks or anything else, because we believe there's a huge demand for independent artists and listening to their music, buying merchandise from them, buying tickets from them, etc. And that's the future of FENIX.
Yeah, and just for completing the QTracks picture, and obviously we're going to talk more about FENIX, which is what we're here for, of course. But the QTracks distribution model works in markets where we have a partner that is very dominant already. It's not an accident that we've chosen developing markets where A, they don't have a number of alternatives, B, the telcos in those markets tend to be more dominant than we expect in more developed countries, and C, music is passionate, people are passionate about music there, and the ability to drive distribution that is free, that is supported by a dominant player, is much greater in terms of adoption. We're not relying on somebody going and finding our app and thinking, I'll download that and give it a go.
Alright, so now before we finish off the last part about QTracks, right? Because actually QTracks, just so you know audience, QTracks is the brand name that is associated with the music, while FENIX.CASH is basically the business management platform tool that will be built on the blockchain. So if you're wondering why is there association with QTracks, these two have to work hand in hand, but not necessarily in sync, right? But they have to kind of work together in order for the database to grow on both sides. So right now, in terms of what is the go-to marketing strategy for QTracks, I did see you guys mention in the white paper that the partnership with telcos to adopt your project. Could you mention the number of telcos, which countries, and the average user database and potential growth rate? Well, don't even give specific numbers, but if you could, it would be great.
Yeah, okay. Let me say what we can say, right? We are intending in developing countries, and preferably, frankly, the further afield we are, the better it is. We don't want to step on anybody's toes, right? So we are starting out in the Caribbean, then Eastern Europe, and then onwards, right? We'll come to Asia, we think, in a significant way. There has been, in developing the model, a concern for keeping certain elements of it private, so we've sort of stepped cautiously, but we will say this. You don't need to sell any telco on the virtues of free music. They already want free music. So when we come in the door of a telco, we don't have to be brilliant salesmen. They already want what we've got. They've been looking for it, particularly in developing countries. Telcos are experts at selling subscriptions of their own, which is telephone subscriptions. In a lot of these countries, they can't sell telephone subscriptions. People top up cards day by day. So the telco's view is, right, to the music industry, you're asking us to sell a music subscription. We can't even sell our own telco subscriptions. We have zero chance. And the truth of the matter is, in our discussions, we had to actually get telcos to explain the reality of what it is to operate in a lot of the countries we intend operating in. So the fact is that we will start out, as I say, a bit further afield, right? And we will operate in countries in which we're not stepping on people's toes, but in which we think there's a great opportunity to monetize that which is currently not monetized to a great multiple of the earnings we think these countries are currently providing for all the rights holders.
Right. So now, in terms of FENIX.CASH's platform, right, could you share with the audience, right, how is it going to help the indie artists, once they sign up with your platform, and how are they going to connect with their fans?
Yeah. There's several primary ways that we intend helping indie artists, and it's worthwhile being very specific about them, right? First one is, how does an indie artist earn a living at the moment, right? Or try to earn a living is probably more accurate. And the answer is, they play a gig, they play a show, and they sell a bit of merchandise. That is a very difficult way to earn a living for two reasons. One is the merchandise, they all love selling merchandise, but it's sold at gigs, at shows, and maybe they do 2, 3, 4 shows a week, so it means it's sold for a few hours a week. The shop, if you like, is not open 24/7, and it should be. And the second thing is that it's very geographically limited because it's only sold to people who can show up to a specific show, which obviously is a very small percentage of the total global audience. So what we provide is the ability to sell 24/7 to a global audience. Now, why couldn't it happen before cryptocurrency? In theory, you would say it could happen from a centralized platform. It didn't need blockchain. But in fact, it did not happen because of the fact that in order for it to happen, they would have to set up e-commerce, they'd have to set up debit and credit cards. And for most artists, that is a fairly major challenge. The beauty about crypto is we can set up everything. We can even set up their wallet for them. A fan can very directly send money to the artist, bypass all sorts of middlemen, and the artist can very readily receive it, and we also make it easy for the artist to convert back into fiat currency. So we actually think that crypto, in the first instance, really revolutionizes the ability for an artist to sell directly to fans. What will they sell? They will sell alluring merchandise, privileged access. Now what we mean by that is, we don't want boring stuff, nor does a band want to sell boring stuff. If it's a bit more interesting, it will be much more valuable to the band. So it might be a backstage pass, it might be a preview of up-and-coming music, it might be a limited run t-shirt. Whatever it is, this is really facilitated by the FENIX app and by the use of crypto within that app. The second thing, which is important, is that we're making the app customizable. And what we mean by that is that a band can, with little effort, in maybe a 15-minute period, roll in all of their social media, Twitter, Facebook, whatever it might be, and customize the app to feature their music, their merchandise on the front of the app. Now, not only is that valuable to the band, but also it's valuable to us because the band will encourage their fans to use their app, and ultimately it is valuable to the band because we'll actually give a percentage of all revenue earned by their customized app to the band. So when somebody plays music, we earn advertising revenue. When they buy something, we earn some commission on that. Parts of that will go back to the band so they have an alternate monthly revenue from the use of the app. And we think that can actually be quite significant. The third thing is that that when it comes to tokens, they're wonderful in the hands of people that purchase them, but we also think it's very important that the artist community has tokens granted to them. And so we have something called the Artist Manifesto, which we invite everybody to read, which is a manifesto of artist rights and how we can assist the artist. And under that, we're going to give 120 million tokens to the artist community over a 2-year period. It will be based on the percentage of plays. So if you are an artist with 1% of plays in our system, you'll get 1% of the tokens. These tokens might start out being worth tens of millions of dollars. Maybe they escalate, maybe they don't. But the point is they're granted to the artist community to, first of all, give them something, to familiarize themselves with the system, to create, if you like, a social media buzz about what all of this is. I think it's very important. And finally, and probably most seriously when it comes to the blockchain, we see the blockchain, and this is a bit of a longer-term project, as being the ideal technology for improving on reporting and royalty paying. At the moment, royalties are not transparent. Most artists have no idea where they stand. They don't know how many songs were played in Singapore today, or in Melbourne, or in Seoul, wherever it may be, and they certainly don't know about the distribution of royalties. This will enable them to know that, and while signed artists with labels might have difficulty being part of the system because the labels have their own centralized system, for all that 98% of unsigned artists, this is a perfect system, and the blockchain can facilitate that beautifully.
Okay.
So just to,
Yeah, sure.
say something about what the artist already does. So it's not to say that the artists don't already reach out to their fan base. They do. They have their Facebook pages, they have their YouTube stuff, the stuff on their websites, but it's all different things do different aspects. So what this platform allows is that it allows the artist to curate, an engagement page where there is all the stuff from all their social media, there is all their videos that they want to highlight, there is all the tracks that they want to highlight, there are all the avenues on how you can access their music, but it's curated in a way that the artist wants to arrange it with the fan, right? And at the end of the day, they are commercializing and we call it buying opportunities at the bottom, which the artist can determine how to use and engage. So imagine if they were on a social media page. Yes, there's all the news about the artist, but then there's no commercial function. You can watch all the videos, but then there's no activation function on how you. So everything exists, but it exists in all bits and pieces. This kind of creates a focused platform that the artist can curate their relationship with their fan.
So the all-in-one platform.
Correct.
Okay, so now there is the direct-to-band model, which is a great idea, but how do you overcome the conflict of interest with the various record labels that prevent artists from joining your platform or taking proceeds of their earnings?
Well, the first thing is, it needs to be recognized that 98% plus of artists don't have a label, are unsigned. So there is no conflict of interest for the vast majority of artists. For those for whom there could be a perceived conflict of interest, it's really up to them. In fact, our entire philosophy when it comes to artists using our platform is they should use it as they like within whatever system they exist in. So if an artist, for example, is signed to a label, it will have certain contractual obligations and will choose how to fulfill those contractual obligations. Not really our business. We are there to provide a platform to assist. For the unsigned artists, there are tons of ways we can assist. For the signed artists, there might be fewer ways, but there still will probably be ways they can avail themselves of our system.
So, okay, I think the next would be more on the token economics. So, how does the FENIX token integrate into this whole token economy for FENIX, the FENIX platform?
Well, I think one of the very important things is, in the purest sense, a token is supposed to be something that really provides utility. And it's not supposed to be just a speculative vehicle for people to make money. It's supposed to be something where people can actually use the token to provide them a utility they otherwise wouldn't have. And this is very much what FENIX is. We want the token to be access to the privileged world of dealing with the artist directly, getting merchandise from them, getting tickets from them, whatever it may be. And I have to say that a standard ICO works on the premise that you might start out with 10,000 investors, and if you do your job correctly, you might end up with 15, 20, 25,000 investors. If we do our job correctly, and we're very cognizant of the fact that it's a big if, we have to do a lot to do our job correctly, but if we do our job correctly, we might start out with 10,000 investors or subscribers, and over time we might go to 1 million fans, right? And that obviously creates a very vibrant tokenomic system. It probably creates quite a bit of stability, right, in a tokenomic system, because for every potential subscriber there is who has a financial interest, there might be 1,000, 10,000 fans who want the token purely for utility. And that we find a very exciting prospect.
So will this FENIX token be pegged to the dollar or any fiat in that respective country? Because music fans may not like the token fluctuation or sudden drop in value. So how would the FENIX team actually handle this?
We're looking at a number of ways, but what is readily apparent to us right at the moment is that large numbers of fans will create its own stability, right? That is, you move out of a speculative currency into a much more stable currency if it really is a utility. And if people are using it, not just to make a quick buck or whatever it might be. So that's the first thing. Now, should it be pegged, should it not be pegged? We're looking at those. We haven't come to final decisions, but we do think that if you get an adequate ecosystem of fans, then it gives it inherent stability.
Sure. And I think we're also very cognizant of the fact that with artists, if artists expect to receive an amount for a t-shirt because they're used to trading in fiat currency, we cannot leave them in a situation where they're subject to great deals of fluctuation and they find themselves in situations where they're suddenly selling their t-shirts at a fraction of what they thought.
That's right. Because in the cryptocurrency world, of course, as we all know it today, that if you were to do any kind of transaction just 2 to 3 months ago, you would actually be 70% down in terms of revenue if you were to hold the Ethereum today. So I guess this will be something that must be sorted out in the future.
Yeah.
Okay. So now,
but I think, sorry, just before we go on to that, I think it's important to remember or to look at the infrastructure of what we have here. So as Allan says, we believe there'll be a natural transition from the investor driving traffic and usage of the token into the fan driving usage of the token. If you think about an investor buys probably with a view to selling at some point, whereas a fan buys with an intention to use. And so if you have limited supply, strong demand, and fans buying to use, they use to put and the tokens end up in the hands of the artists. Now, if that demand is driving the price up, the artist sees that they're increasing value, it takes away some of the selling pressure of the tokens. So you don't simply have investors who are buying on the basis of news flow and product flow coming in. If that relationship between the artist and the fan remains strong, and they continue to want product from the fan, then actually volatility and fluctuation doesn't necessarily affect them as much.
I think I've always mentioned in some of my videos that as projects progress in their development, especially after an ICO, what would happen is that their intrinsic value actually goes up and then their speculative value actually goes down. So this is something that I think the FENIX team would be capable of working together towards to increase that intrinsic value, and that way it would actually reduce the level of speculation. Very good answer. Okay, so of course we are still in the early stage of participating in this ICO. So how would the existing customers, especially, how do you plan on onboarding customers to FENIX.CASH from the QTrax platform, right? Is it a way of advertising, or is it more of onboarding them with a compulsory sign-up or a tied account?
We have something that is wonderful in terms of onboarding that few industries have, which is we have potentially millions of ambassadors in the form of the bands. Bands have a relationship to fans, which is a very tight relationship. A fan is enormously guided by the preferences and by the recommendations of a band. So if a band has its own app and says, try this out, you couldn't have a better way of inducing somebody to try it out. You really couldn't, right? You can do all the advertising in the world, you can do all the profile in the world. If a band says to its fans, hey, we've got something, try this out, it's fantastic. And so what you have really is literally beginning with thousands, probably going to maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of ambassadors who say, here is an app, try it out, right? And that is clearly the primary way, and it's a unique way in some ways to the music industry. I can't think of another industry where you would as readily get adoption as you can if you do this correctly. And it's one of the many reasons, apart from the righteousness of it, that we see the artist as the starting point of everything here, right?
It's a natural relationship, between fan and band. That's really what makes it easy. We don't want to push it down anyone's throat. We're not going to force anyone to do anything. But the relationship of music and the engagement of music, all of this leads us to believe that will happen organically. At the same time, we might analyze it and see if we push out a little bit to bands and fans as well as it evolves. But the originality of our thought was, this is a match made in heaven. This works already. So now let's try and enhance it. Let's give them another reason to talk to one another.
But Ryan, if I go back to the original the question, which was users of QTrax and how they get onboarded into the FENIX.CASH universe, I think so. What's important to understand here is the platform that we have will not only be about transactions using FENIX.CASH. but it's about, as Sandy said, creating a comprehensive platform, or sort of point of engagement that's curated as the artist wants. So for Qtrax people who use music, who come across an artist, they will see the music, they may see an aggregation of social media, and they may choose at some point to carry out a transaction using FENIX.CASH. But their point of utility and utilization of the platform may actually exist for a degree of time before they're required to onboard to make a transaction using FENIX.CASH. So I think it's important that we understand that there is use here in the platform for the artists and for their fans above and beyond simply the transactions using FENIX.CASH.
It's also a question of how hard you want to push.
Of course.
So I mean, you could be an artist and you can take out a venue like this and say, okay, you know, if you have my app downloaded, you enter for free. If you don't have it, you pay $15 at the door, and suddenly you can just spike your engagement. It really is about how hard you want to push something or how you want to make it work, and it comes down to the artist. They can decide, you know, how hard they want to push. So if they want their fans to engage into the FENIX.CASH platform, they can create an event or create an activity that says, I mean, like, you know, my new single, if you download the app, you get my new single for free. So it's about how the artists themselves want to push it, but the platform will become engageable at any point in time that the fan wants to engage.
That is actually very, very powerful in itself. Okay, so now the next question would be, who are you partnering to use their infrastructure and accelerate the mass adoption of the FENIX.CASH app?
Yeah, when you say infrastructure, what do you have in mind?
So
Sorry to answer the question with a question.
We're looking at, of course, the blockchain aspect,
Yeah.
right? And also, if you have any current partnerships that you can mention or convenient to mention, right? Because usually you don't, but if you do, that will help out in terms of growing the music aspect as well, and of course the app side.
Okay, well, I think that when the first apps came out, most of them were based on Ethereum, and Ethereum certainly revolutionized the blockchain industry with its smart contracts and the ability for companies to issue their own tokens. We have, on good advice, I believe, chosen Quantum, QTUM, and there are a number of reasons we think it's perfect, right? Including the fact that the heads of QTUM have decided that it has the potential to revolutionize entertainment industries. And since we are really intending to make a major impact on the music industry, we think it's a platform to be on. It also happens to be that technically we have come to believe that it does represent the best of Ethereum and Bitcoin. So it's a platform we have chosen. I must say that for us, the technology is vital to delivering what we want, but what we want is developed through the app, and what the consumer will see is the app, right? If it turns out in the future that there is better technology, we would always be open-minded to it. But for the moment, we are of the conviction that Quantum is the best that we have available.
And I think in relation to that, our approach to adoption and marketing is different to what you see in other blockchain apps and products. In so much as we don't use the blockchain product to drive adoption in the first instance. But what we rely on is simply the relationship that already exists between a band or an artist and their fans. So people will come and use the platform, not necessarily because they believe in FENIX.CASH, but because it provides them a means and a form of access they don't have otherwise to their bands, which they are already passionate about. And so in terms of who we have to partner to drive that adoption, the simple answer is we have all of the bands out there. Lance alluded to earlier when he said we have millions of potential ambassadors for this.
And I must say, there is a profound silliness, for want of a better term, right, to all of this. Because you have
the technical term.
Yes, it's a highly technical term, right? I suggest you consult your Oxford Dictionary, and you'll find out what it means. However, the reason I use the word silliness is it's a more polite of many terms I could use, right? And because you have the band, which is desperate for living, and you have the fan, which is desperate to get things for the band, and somehow or another, neither one of them can be satisfied. So when you look at that, you've got, right, a band who's more than willing to supply, right, and a fan who is very much demanding. So you've got the supply and demand sides of the equation. What you don't have is a facilitation, right? And this is what FENIX.CASH is exactly that facilitation, where you have desire on both sides of the equation, right? But somehow or another, it just can't come, the two sides can't come together, and that's what we do.
Okay, so just to ask, I think a very important question, when will this FENIX.CASH app going to be available to the public?
From the moment that we complete our ICO, the product in its basic form is already ready, as we intended it to be. There are a number of principles we thought were important, right, in trying to sort of what I've referred to as taking the high road with an ICO. The first one is we think it's very important to have a transformative idea, right? Obviously, there's nothing wrong with having a more peripheral idea, but having a transformative idea for industry is important. Secondly, the transformative idea actually has to be feasible and one that industry experts feel as though is not only feasible but desirable, right? And we're very thankful that Sandy's with us to be able to give that perspective. Third thing is you have to have a product, and the importance of a product is several-fold because certainly in terms of tokenomics, if you don't have a product and you're asking people to invest in the development of a product, then not very exciting things are going to happen with your token until the product is developed, right? So very important to us that that product be ready. Now what we have is a basic product, not only the consumer product, but the artist admin panel is ready now. What we're working on, and it will be ready around April the 21st. Don't ask me to swear by that date because as we all know, software development can be a few days out, but around April 21st, we'll have the customizable version of that product, which we think is very important. And then, after our ICO ends on May the 21st, we will release it to the world.
Okay. So if, in terms of participation, so for those who are interested to kind of beta test this app, will this, if the app is available, will it be available for all or only for those who are participating in the ICO?
No, it will be available for all from the end of the ICO, right? We won't restrict it to anybody. In fact, as far as we're concerned, the more people that use it, the better. And then you'll start seeing bands also creating their own versions, right, of the app. And I have to say, I think it'll give us, each of us, a personal thrill to see that, because that's when you really, really see it coming to life. That's when you see the artist selecting it as a very important tool of dealing with their fans, and where the ecosystem really begins to thrive.
And we've been asked a lot of times, we're here in Singapore, say, is this a Singaporean, is this a Southeast Asian proposition? And the beauty of this whole thing is absolutely not. The simple fact of the matter is, anywhere that a band has fans, this works. So there may be questions about language interfaces and so on, but our intention always is that this be available in as many different languages as we can. We're working on interfaces for that. But the simple fact of the matter is we're going to see little communities pop up where we have adoption of this. And you'll see, in a variety of countries doing that, but this is not tied to any particular jurisdiction.
I have to say, this morning we had a bit of a press conference and we had a couple of wonderful artists performing. And when you meet artists, and it doesn't matter whether you meet them in Singapore or in Seoul or in New York, they're all crying out for something like this. They really, really are. And it's not that you have to be a neuroscientist to be able to work out how to do this. You just have to have the dedication to really start from the point of view of how the artist can be assisted in making a living, particularly the non-famous artists, right? And what we are presenting today as tools for artists making a living will no doubt evolve. It's already evolved as we've been on the road meeting artists and thinking of new ways, and we'll continue to think of new ways and add them. But the starting point is, how do we help the artists? And whichever artist you speak to, from those we spoke to today to people we meet around the world, they all want to find ways to make a living more easily.
A dream begins when someone sits down in a room with a guitar or piano, or whatever instruments they choose to write on, and write a song. The dream ends if you can't do anything with it. So, if you really look at it from the ground up, and by the way, you don't know which song is going to be a massive hit. Sandy's mentioned this a couple of times. Songs that were completely unknown later on became massive hits. The obvious hits that we've heard about over the last 30, 40, 50 years are playing today. There are many more that aren't, but that's the dream. But it starts with the finished song, and now what the hell do I do with it? So you get out and start playing, you put a band together, you get on the road, you get some gigs. The question is, how much more can you enhance that? How much more opportunity can you give an artist to try and get that lucky break? And even if they don't get the lucky break, this is what they want to do with their lives, right? This is what the dream, this is the essence of the dream. So, we believe in that. Build a business around it, but, we're deep into the thought of helping these guys because we love music and we love the arts, and we think that music has got, has probably taken the brunt of the disruption in the digital age. So let's do something about it.
And even an artist that has 1,000 fans deserves to make a living. They don't have to have 10 million fans, right? However many fans they have, however many people enjoy the music, those people really enjoy their music, and it's a great pity when the artists can't earn a living. It shouldn't require millions of fans in order for an artist to earn a living. It should be possible with a much smaller number of fans.
I think it's always important to have a platform that can amplify or assist all these artists to be able to really be able to focus on their art and not think too much about the business aspects. So before we close, are there any more closing comments that you guys might want to add?
No, look, I think that
Most of
I
it.
think as with all things, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of diligence, and we're up for it, right? We understand that you don't create a change, you don't create a massive ecosystem overnight, right? But we're not going to stop until we do. And for us, it's very exciting. It's very exciting to have a path, and I must say, it's very exciting to have a path which is not dependent on anybody except ourselves, right? And so in creating this, right, it really depends on our efforts, and we either succeed or fail depending on our efforts, but we're going to make sure we succeed by putting in those efforts until we do.
And we've never been scared to be overly ambitious, really. I mean, this whole team here, Allan and I started some years ago, and probably something that bonded us in that regard. So we're not scared of that, and we put the work in. And there are no guarantees in anything. And I think the participation, this collective participation that we're going to encourage, will help us grow, because you don't do it alone. But we believe that it's possible for it to make a significant difference, a profound difference if you get it right. And that's what we are dedicated to.
I think from what I personally can derive from this interview is that I can sense the passion. I also can sense the experience of this team. So do you think that the FENIX.CASH platform will be one of those ICOs that's going to be a breakthrough in the music industry? Well, you can find out more details in the links to the description below. And nonetheless, thank you guys so much for watching, and see you in the next AMA.